I think we're ready, Leslie-Ann. You ready to go?
Awesome. So apologies to those in the community that have already heard much of what I'm about to tell you, but I wanted to get a community update on the product strategy and the direction of what we've been doing for the last 3 months from the product perspective, and why you've been seeing some of the things this time that are a little bit different because we've already had many things in action. So I've been around now this is my second community meeting. I've been around for 90 days, which it feels a lot longer some days. And initially, what I was trying to do is look at our direction of travel for 2021. I wanted to understand where we are. I wanted to understand where we need to go, what changes we need to get there, how we're going to make those changes, and how we're going to measure our progress. And I throw up this framework just to say there's a lot of work that could and should be done in a product capacity. Contribution is very, very welcome. And that's already been happening with Product Council. But the boxes in yellow are the kind of boxes I've been focusing on this quarter, because I think we've had excellent work happening in the product requirement space, in the product development space. And there was a need for a little bit of a look from a bird's eye view when I first came in. So I wanted to show you a little bit of the facts and trends that have kind of surfaced as part of this investigation. COVID has created a new level of awareness and demand of instant payments globally. It's also created new data on the impact of pricing and gaining customer adoption. If you look at, for example, in Kenya, the prices of transactions were reduced as part of the COVID response, and as such, digital adoption was raised. But that's not a permanent change necessarily. That's a change that was temporarily for 2020 purposes. But it really did show us that adoption is hampered by sometimes the cost. People are very cost sensitive. So also I looked at the board and I went, actually, we've got a board who can open doors with regulators, government, commercial sector, and it brings us credibility via the Modulip brand that is vital, I think, to kind of solving the problems that we want to solve. There are big problems around financial inclusion that we want to kind of tackle as a community together. And we've also seen, I think, globally an open banking trend. We've talked a lot over the last year about PISP. Google brought the project to the table through the success lens of India and UPI. And actually, since then, there's been new papers published that show PISP is fundamental to an open banking regulator-led strategy for financial inclusion purposes, as a CGAP paper that the community might be interested in reading. So I think that's important for us to kind of have our blueprints ready so that we can take it to market and really make some impact with it. And I think there are now also other bodies who are advocating for no vendor lock-in through open source and digital public goods, and that's really good for us as well. We heard this week from Open G2P, and that really has been a COVID-led response this year, but Ebola-led response before. We also see that in an African context, from when Modulip's foundations on the level 1 principles were started, maybe back in 2015-16 till now, the FinTech and DFSP neobank ecosystem is burgeoning in emerging markets, and payments aggregation, removal of payments fragmentation is a huge pain point that many are trying to address. And we heard that from Hypepo this week as well, and from some of the other presentations that we saw. We know that there is a pain point out there to be solved. And we also know that merchants and bill payments will enable value chain thinking, that fast, easy, safe ways to move money is a particularly unsolved space where we move between different parts of the ecosystem, from the financially excluded customer, maybe in social protection programs, right through to the way that the value chains run that service those communities. However, we do live in a pre-existing ecosystem. There is a long national procurements process. There's a consultancy ecosystem in front of that process. Vendor selection is normally waterfall, one of the last things that happens. And it doesn't traditionally include vendors in the kind of the landscape in work and in the decision in process. So often that means that Modulip is excluded before they're even considered, before our vendors are considered. There's level 1 training programs that mention Modulip and open source. However, we don't have an active engagement program at the moment with that. And maybe we're losing opportunities because of that. I think projects that get live and create impact, they do require a consortium approach, be they government or commercial, but it takes time and energy and long sales cycles. And unless there is a clear pain point being solved with a commercial imperative driving the progress can actually be pretty slow. And our target audience today, our target audience being the adopter community, which we talked a lot about this week, being the scheme and the participants and the regulator trio, they do have choices. We are not the only approach to solving this problem. So our ultimate goal of financial inclusion is not just a lack of technology, it's a need for meeting of minds around solving problems. It needs a mix of commercial and regulatory actors, potentially more engagement with the influencer community in order to get those blueprints and our thinking and our movement to move forwards. So that's kind of where I think we are started. And actually, if we look at our baseline progress to date, this is, as of this morning, what we currently have in the ecosystem. Mawali have DFSPs connected. We have technically readiness there, but regulators need to get involved in getting more corridors launched and over the line. UNCDF Myanmar is making great progress, and they have dates now for a closed user group pilot launch of different use cases in the loan disbursement, loan repayment space. And we also have TIPS who are making progress and have a June-July 21 launch with a plan for a closed user group with 2 banks, 2 mobile money players, but they're not yet connected to a hub. And I just threw in there, like there are networks already out there. We want to be able to tell a story like MFS Africa's story. Over 200 million users transfer money digitally across 37 African countries, irrespective of the user's mobile money accounts. That's where we need to be pushing for. So, apologies for the really long slide. It's the last one that's full of text that's helping me with remembering the kind of things I wanted to say. So we have an offer that does address some key global trends. We have an opportunity to create a movement to reduce payments fragmentation and future innovation towards financial inclusion. But there are large barriers to entry today in choosing to get started with Modulip, and the window of opportunity, because of the need for change, it's shortening. We know already that part of the problem is that if we are working with a conservative and risk-averse audience at national scale, we have to be credible, we have to be quality, and we don't have a reference implementation that is sufficiently scaled yet to point at and go, look, this is our software running. Our messaging doesn't talk well yet to the non-technical audience that we want to be getting to consider Modulip, and so we've got some work to do. We aren't necessarily doing cost optimization from the 0 to 1. How do we get going? But today was a massive step forward there when we saw the presentation we just saw. That the consideration phase is changing. For some routes to market, our lack of out-of-the-box already compatible options for the software that we're not providing is potentially a barrier to entry as well. And our community today, it needs to grow. It needs to include skin in the game players who will run hubs or will be supplying software to businesses that are going to run hubs. And we need a deep connection to how those consortiums come together today and make decisions so that we are validating our approach a little bit more. And so a big part of what I've been doing is connecting us to what we do know in terms of the ecosystem. So the goals for 2021 that I've been discussing in detail and talking to the board of directors and the TGB quite a bit about for our system as a whole, we want our focus for 2021 to be traction on the ground and community sustainability. That ultimately is live hubs, connected DFSPs, running real money rails, and we cannot really get started on our financial inclusion impact metrics till we first of all get further along the hurdle. So I've been talking a lot with various folks about the Mojulip adoption funnel. It's a standard marketing funnel, and it's really looking through the lens of an adopter and going, how do we go from they have no knowledge about Mojulip at all through to they are actually running a hub. And there's different personas and different kinds of actors, but fundamentally we do have a leaky bucket right now, and we need to start to remove friction in this funnel. So hence you'll have already heard quite a lot about removing friction. What we'd like to succeed at by the end of the year is to set ourselves some targets that are focused on market traction. We'd like to set targets for the community as a whole, that we celebrate success based on 3 closed user group pilots, 1 real money implementation starting to scale. That means more DFSPs connected and real money transactions flowing. And if we can, a bonus would be 3 independent influencer organizations are actually able to use some of our blueprints in part of their work. A big part of the conversation is, who are we targeting, this persona question. And I think I've started to use the word adopter rather than customer, because it's a little bit different working the open source way. And what I mean when I say adopter is that trio that we've been talking about all week when we talk about national payment space. The scheme owner, the hub operator, and the DFSP participants are central. And I've actually copied and pasted Adrian's diagram from earlier in there to kind of hammer that home, that we do need that full group to want to work together for it to work. In private sector market-led opportunistic opportunities, we may well see a technology-driven lead, but it, at the end of the day, requires the DFSP participation for it to make sense from an account holder perspective. So when I say closed user group pilot, what exactly do I mean there? And I came up with a definition that we can change, but that's where I want to start with. I think it's at least 3 DFSPs participating, solving for a use case that is enabled by our blueprints. We know what use cases we can solve for. And a scoped engagement is put together that is determined its own funding model. We have clarity on who will run the hub operationally and use the digital asset. And we have clarity on settlement and how it will be done. And it could involve a regulator for bonus points. We want to source these projects, and I can talk to the group afterwards about some of the things that I'm aware of. I think a lot of the folk in the community know the kind of projects that I'm aware of and what I'm talking to the board about. But we want to source more, and we want to make sure that we are working closer with the adopter community in 2021. So as I was looking at our leaky bucket, I was wondering to myself, well, how might we start to unlock this leaky bucket? And I think there are a lot of ways that we could do it from a product perspective. They don't all involve writing code. I was looking through the lens of what can we do based on how we get existing deployments more traction. How do we support more new pilots? How do we make sure that our value proposition is sufficiently attractive and talked about to potential adopters? And there's lots more we could talk about in terms of where this work has come to. But fundamentally, the work has led us to this. We've seen it already this week. We want to be making 2021 the year of removing friction, of understanding and resolving gaps through the eyes of adopters to enhance traction, and confidence in our claim of trustworthy, quality, and credible, which hopefully will also mean that 0 to 1 cost reduction is a big part of our story. And it's really about removing risk. It's about traction risk and reputational risk, making sure that we are really focused on what it takes to get to our ultimate goal. And so with that in mind, you've seen this bigger slide, which is potential ways that we could start to measure our progress that are less about how many lines of code we write and more about our traction on the ground. And those are metrics that we'll start to talk about a little bit more as we do our prioritization work through this year. But it's also important that we have health metrics in the equation too. And Simeon is really looking deeply at this. So this is just a starting point conversation. It really is showing you that Simeon and Paula and I are ultimately trying to create an ecosystem that works together. So very much we're thinking about how adopters bring developers. So how do we get connected to that ecosystem and get that circle of that virtuous cycle going? And how do we ensure that we're signposting choices to our potential adopter community, particularly in the national space? I saw this slide from our friends at FCA on yesterday's presentations, and I thought, wow, that's a really interesting model for us to be thinking about. We can get to a place where our community is about innovation through collaboration at scale if we set ourselves up for success in this kind of way. That's where we want to get to. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit with the remaining time we have left to short-term quarter 1 action. What do I think is really important for us to focus on this quarter? With that bucket in mind, I think we have to do some work around awareness. And this work isn't all software development. We have Product Council. I'll mention in a minute more details about Product Council. But sometimes the work is productization of what we already have in our software, the way that we talk about it. And so we're working closely with the marketing team. And you saw with Lewis that we already have a starter and beta sandbox environment starting to come together, which is Modulip branded. And that will be our home for some of the workstream activity that comes out with both the trainer program linked to the sandbox, linked to demos, and a moment of show, don't tell. We've got this underway. We've also planned some white papers, so I'll talk to you about that in a minute. So there's always a need for contribution and help with getting some of these things going. And fundamentally, that's kind of where we started with the Product Council this year. Product Council was an open invitation to anyone in the community to come along and get involved. And we had people from all of these companies participate and join us. And it's an open forum. So if you're interested in joining it, please get in touch with us at the foundation and we'll get you connected to that community. The kind of work that we've kicked off first is this. We have a demos working group who are really looking at what demos might help the sales process to help people understand better the Modulip blueprints and the Modulip hub. And hopefully you'll start to see that the work there is actually very linked to what we saw today is coming through in the demos just now. There's a validation that we really do need to have this kind of content. We have a hub sandbox environment up now, and so we're very much we've been supporting the hackathon, the DFS Labs, and we're using that as a validation point to learn about what's working and what's not working in our APIs, and see if we can bring some feedback into the ideation process of what we should be working on. We've got a stream that's working on hub operator requirements. We've been actively engaging with our existing adopter community to identify needs for the roadmap with that in mind, validate kind of where we stand on that. That will come through on Friday as well. And product taxonomy, we actually need to look at the language that we use, make sure that we're aligned with the influencer community language, and making sure that the way that we talk about Modulip is making sense to the outside world. So there's a group that is set up to kind of steer and take that further alongside the marketing team at the foundation. We had a vote on white papers that were seen as priority for our group. And this is the key things that we want to start working on, that what is Modulip, why it matters from an influencer decision maker perspective. Real Modulip usage, starting to talk about what exactly is going on there a bit more. Security matters, how does Modulip think about it? And hub operator need to know information. Key things that will come out as part of the training work stream, hopefully as well. So very much, let's get us all aligned in the same strategy. We came up with this picture to help us start thinking about a simpler product style architecture picture for the what is Modulip work. And we've been discussing things like this as kind of assets that we can also look to bring to the community. But it's important to say at the Product Council, it's a mix of both technical actors and product people all coming together. And what I really enjoy about that is it takes me back to my days of being in startup land, where really the magic starts to happen when business and technology comes together. And I really valued the DA's team being right in there, engaging with product conversations. So thank you to the community that are coming along to those sessions. Second one, we need to focus on a good first experience for any adopter team or any tech company in a partner program. We've been talking about this last time as well, but really we do need to reduce that barrier to entry, and we've seen today a real possibility of how that starts to happen. We need to have simpler get started documentation. We need a simpler business process best practice. And again, some of this is not about new technology build, it's about productization and consolidation of what we already know and have in the community. And for the third objective, we have to really, I think, focus on the whole community having confidence in our claim of trustworthy, quality, and credible. And so this will come through quite a lot on Friday in terms of our recommendations from Product Council as to what is important to do this quarter. It's almost do less and consolidate in order to move faster in the rest of the year. So we're looking at in Product Council at how do we think about the roadmap and how do we make decisions about prioritization, because everything is important, but the reality is that we have very constrained resource, and it's important that we spend it well. So we're looking at questions that are important to answer, and I think it's through the lens of traction risk and reputational risk. So really asking ourselves, is the work that we're going to do going to increase adopter traction on the ground? And can you be specific about what adopter and how? And also, will this remove reputational risk of the hub failing to deliver for our target adopter? Those two questions are fundamental. And what we're not saying is people have to stop work if they're doing work. But we really wanted to make sure that there's a lens put together that is focused around what we choose to talk about at the foundation. So that is my presentation in a nutshell. I wasn't sure, I haven't been watching the chat questions, so I don't know if there's particular things I need to address. Simeon, do you know if there's anything that I should be actively looking at? It was a bit of a talking conversation just to show everyone what's going on with Product Council, and hopefully it's kind of aligning and making sense. We'll have more of a conversation about it on Friday, and we'll show you how this whole thing aligns together. But let's see. No, I don't see any particular comments in the session to do with Product Council. So I'm open to anyone to come and find me between now and Friday and talk about what I've just said. I'm open to conversation about POCs and not POCs, closed user group pilots and opportunities that you can see for us to get ground adoption, and then working out how we in the roadmap, working in the ideation work and the prioritization work, we think about how we can best support those pilots and projects and celebrate the wins, because fundamentally what we want to do is get a better picture of a network that's being built that is Mojaloop compatible. Thank you very much, Simeon. That's my update.
I think one of the things that hopefully you've collected from these various presentations today and the last 2 days is the emphasis this year on gaining traction and seeing deployments come online. And there's a lot of moving parts. Obviously, it's not as simple as just calling something up and saying let's do a Mojaloop pilot. There's work across many different groups within the organization. If you recall the org chart that I put up earlier this week, in addition to staff and the product management function that Leslie Ann covers and that Simeon covers with the community management and Kim covers with DevOps and release management and such. We have the technical governing board that's got their eye on a strategic Commission, we've got the Design Authority, we've got the Community Council, the Product Council. Don't forget, we also have a marketing steering group that's trying to convert some of the requirements from the community and from the Product Council into deliverables that can be used with the marketplace. So there's plenty of opportunity to engage and participate and move us forward as we try to achieve these goals. And it's, as Leslie Ann pointed out, it's not just coding. There's documentation, there's demos, there's a lot that needs to be done to get us to that point where we see success in the deployments. So I hope you, as you listen this week, if you have questions about how to engage, if there's other people in your company that you want to become more involved with this project, please do let us know. I know we have a diverse group of people that have joined the marketing steering group that typically aren't on these calls, the community events, but very active in providing feedback and messaging and amplification of our messaging out in the marketplace. So, each group has its own unique strengths and capabilities. And then hopefully we can all knit it together into a cohesive set of messages and deliverables that again, get us to our goal. So Simeon, any final thoughts on your end?
No, I just want to thank Leslie and highlight to the community something that I think you've had consistently over the last 3 days, and I think that, Paula, you summarized very clearly. And that is the community, the focus right now is to reorient and to turn our entire community to be more sensitive and more focused on market requirements, market needs. And I think Leslie Ann has excellently captured that through her work with the Product Council. And I guess then the response then now would be for all of us, and and we're having these conversations with the Community Council, but beyond just the governance and the leadership teams, I think from the community right down to the work streams and the individual tactical plans and tasks, I think we need to figure out what to prioritize and what to bring forth to the community that would help us meet the objectives and the needs of adopters and contributors. And that way we're able to go, as Leslie Ann likes to say, go far together as opposed to go faster alone. Perhaps, Kim, you also want to chime in here a bit?
Yeah, no, I think it's been great. And I've been setting up wrap-ups and I've really appreciated, people's response to that. And if you have anything you want to include in that wrap-ups, please feel free to Slack me or email me with that as well, so it gets out to the community. And, what I like is the resonation of the themes. And I feel like this is one of the PIs in a long time where everybody's really aligned to, coming together on those themes. And I think, this is a call for the community that we need to do a little bit less is more this time, and really focusing on those efforts. So the reporting that we do and some of the work stream stuff we are going to do on Friday, it's going to be a little bit different. But again, it's a spirit of, going further together.
Awesome. Leslie Ann, do you want to have the last word before we move on to the last thing?
I'm excited for the year. And I was just saying in the chat, none of this happens if you guys aren't with us. So really it's about creating alignment, but really it requires us all to work together. And if we have blockers to achieving some of those big goals this year, it's better for us to have a conversation about it and see how might we unlock each other. So I want to make sure that you see that we're in this with you and we all have different parts to play in the puzzle.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie Ann, for a great session.